It is 6:30, and I call to order the Public Hospital District Number 4 King County Board of Commissioners Work Study Meeting. It is Wednesday, August 28th, 2019, 6:30. Could we stand for the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would the clerk do the roll call, please?
President Norris,
Here.
Vice President Herron,
Here.
Secretary Spikers,
He is not present at this time.
thank you, Commissioner Pollard,
Here.
Commissioner Carter.
Here. Great. Do I hear a motion for approval of the agenda?
I move approval of the agenda.
Second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None, so that's been approved. Okay, topics for discussion: quality update, patient experience focused trauma, and to post-transaction budget. One of these you? Dr. McCup? Yes. All right, you're on.
All right. I may come up there. So what I've done is pulled out two quality topics for us to focus on. And so sorry, this report is huge and I wanted it to have it in case we needed to reference it. Great. If I grab the wrong one, I'm going to be disappointed. Okay, we'll use the one that you have. Is this easy? No.
Or you start with the inpatient.
So we're going to start with inpatient.
Okay.
That's right. So let's just look at what you have and then hopefully the others will come together better. So just a quick reminder that for all of our patient service lines, there is a patient satisfaction or patient experience survey that occurs. So depending on where they went, they will either get a phone call survey, they'll get a mail survey, or they'll get an email survey. So Medicare only allows inpatient surveys to be done by mail or telephone, but they will allow outpatient surveys to be done in other ways. And so we tailored it based on the population and who we think will give us the best responses. So there's different ways of getting it. Different services, either there's 100% patient satisfaction or there's a random selection. So our inpatients are 100%. Every person who comes through the inpatient, there is a survey sent to them. Our emergency department patients and our clinic patients, it's a random selection. And the clinic patients, it's a random selection based on the provider that they saw. So all of this is highly intentional. And so there's 4 different patient satisfaction groups. So there's inpatient, there's the clinics, there's the emergency department, and then there's all of the outpatient services combined, lab, x-ray, and all of those. And so we'll look, that's the groups we're going to look through tonight. There's an enormous amount of information, so I've tried to kind of whittle it down to where it's just visually something where you can kind of see that all is fine or see anything that something's out of line about. So the inpatient report is what's, if you grab the one that says inpatient across the top in the blue. See that one? You got it? Then you guys have it. Okay. So inpatient reports are unique in that Medicare only allows you to do them in a top box. When patients answer the survey questions, they answer from a scale of 1 to 10. And a top box is called a response of an 8, a 9, or 10. So an 8 and a 10 are exactly the same. So, but what you're measured on is how many top box ratings that you had. So you have your options in the reporting. Your options are twofold: top box or not top box. That's all you get. Right. Yeah. That is the right response. Yeah, so you get top box or not top box, so it's how many of your, of responses that you got were top box. So that's what's being reported here. So, the tan bar here is the summary of the questions that were about communication with nurses. So during your inpatient stay, we have several questions about communication with nurses. And so the scoring is the percentage, so here the last 2 quarters, it's been 77, 79, 78% of respondents gave a top box score. So that's how you measure that. And the question, there's a multitude of questions, and they now are in these domains. So the domain about communication with nurses in the last 4 quarters, so that's what you're measuring here, is the last 4 quarters. They have had an increase, and this actually has been an area that the inpatient unit has been working on, is improving communication all around. So you'll see that they're having results.
I just heard from David. He said he forgot, and he's going to be on his way, he says, in about a half hour.
Okay. When you say that needs to be worked on the communication with nurses, on the, let's see, 4, 7, and 9, how do they determine when it needs help?
So if you.
Because this one has lower.
Yes, so
Yeah.
only this
Right.
is about communication with nurses.
Mhm.
And so they were feeling like we had lower numbers, and then as they have spent time really being
It went up.
intentional. and
They've
so-
gotten better.
Okay,
Yeah. That's what that's about.
okay.
On the second page, the other thing I should point out is you see along the bottom, along the
this-
very bottom here.
Yeah.
Of each one, it tells you how many respondents that you have.
So N equals 10, there was 10 responses, is that what it is? The bottom one?
Yeah, I
What's
don't
the
know
N
where you're
equivalent to
looking.
10? Right here. And N equals 8?
That's correct. That's correct.
This is
That's
the
how
number.
many- That's correct.
Okay,
The N number, that's how many people responded to those questions.
all right.
So
That's the
one
So
equation.
it's small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One person responded the
Yes.
first 2 quarters.
So you, yes.
Oh,
you have a very
okay.
small number.
Wow,
And so that's something that we really struggle with, is getting people to respond.
Mhm.
And this is a problem at a national level.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
At a national level, because people, I think every one of us in the room would say, the last thing I want to do is answer a phone call from a phone number that I don't recognize.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
be at risk of somebody
Right.
marketing to me
Yeah.
or asking me along with questions.
Yeah.
And that's what this is. And so it's,
It'd be a robocall.
it takes, yeah, exactly
Before-
right.
That's what it is.
That's exactly right. And so it takes either a person who has something they want to say,
Mhm.
who will take these calls, and they usually be the ones who score you low, or it's the incredibly generous person who will actually answer your question and patiently go through it. And those, they are not, they just got out of the hospital.
Very far in
The last thing they want to do is talk on the phone a long time. And these take
Yeah.
these take 20 minutes to go through.
I must be different, because I feel like if people call and want to know, I want to tell them. I mean, if it's good, I'd rather say good, and if it's bad,
Thank you.
tell them what they can work on.
Thank you. I'm moving you to the top of the list. We actually
We'll
have
put you
0.
on N
These
equals
have to
20.
be- These have to be administered by a third party vendor.
I bet they
We can
do.
have no part of this.
Yeah, I bet they
So
do.
we upload to the third party vendor all the patients' names and their contact information. We've got a business associates agreement, so it's all protected. And they're the ones who administer this, and then we get the results.
Okay.
So that's what's going on here. So again, we don't have to go through each and every question, but just so you see that the numbers tend to be moving upwards.
But the response of hospital staff don't look, I'm sorry, I guess I'm on the second page
It's fine,
already.
you can be on the second page. Yeah, so
It
you'll
moved
see
and then
trend
it
up in here.
dropped back down below. What happened?
So again, the coming back down, you have one patient responding, so it just makes it hard to say,
Okay.
did it really drop down? or did
Compared to
that
the
one
19,
person do the 10? Yeah.
There's a direct
Wow.
correlation between the number of
Yeah.
responses and
It
the
is.
score.
It really is.
But that one
Which is-
person may be not very happy either.
Yeah, so when we look at these, we still want to treat them with respect, and so we really
Yeah.
have to look at The low scores, somebody had a bad experience, so let's
Yeah.
honor that. And then if the scores are higher, or we gotta have a larger N number, then we just feel like that's something we can really, let's say that's solid, that's really a solid
Mhm.
universal
Mhm.
experience. And then more than anything, work on getting better reporting. So some of the interventions that have been done, and this was implemented about a year and a half ago, is that every patient as they depart, or depart with a letter, that letter signed by me saying, you will get a phone call, you will get something in the mail, will you please respond to it, it's coming from Press-Ganey. Here's what it's about, here's how we use it, we can't get better if you don't give us responses about your experience. And then we make sure the staff at discharge, make sure that we know exactly where they're going to be in the next 30 days. And that's the information we feed up. Because sometimes they go home with a family member, sometimes they depart from us to assisted living, and it's not the same place where they came from.
With no response, do you follow up in any way?
We can't, because
That's hard.
we don't know who
Does
is
the
the
contractor
respondent.
follow up in any way?
Yeah, they have an algorithm that they go through for phone. If they get a hold of the person and the person says, no, I will not participate, it's done. But if they get no answer, or they get partway through, they can get partway through a survey and they'll say, can you call me back and we'll finish it later, and they'll do that.
The entity that's doing this, are they partnering with us, or?
Say that again?
The entity, whoever is doing, you said it's a third party or outside party. Are they partnering with our hospital, or how do we find about them and know about?
So
The outcomes.
CMS has a group of vendors, so they certify the vendors.
Oh, okay.
And then you have to choose from one of the certified vendors.
Okay.
So Press-Ganey is one of the largest across the nation. We were actually using another company before named HealthStream, who was bigger in the healthcare industry than Press-Ganey. Press-Ganey bought them.
Oh, I see.
And they became the biggest.
So, yeah,
Okay.
so now Press-Ganey is the biggest, and we just transitioned to becoming Press-Ganey.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, but they all work pretty much exactly the same. What's different about them is their bells and whistles for their reporting.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, that's some of the tools. So one of the areas that we do feel like, even though the numbers are small, we self-criticize, and that's about communication around medicine, so that's on the third page. And so we self-criticize that we feel like that our communication about medicines could be better. And so there's some programs that are evolving. And we actually have a pharmacy student that's going to be with us on a regular basis. And so we're going to leverage that pharmacy student. It'll be a great experience for them. And
I think that's a difficult one, and I think it's a difficult one for everybody, even when you're a health professional and you see a medication you don't know and you have to get the hospital formulary out or something, or call the pharmacy and say, okay, I'm missing something here, tell me more about this drug. Patients put a lot of trust in us. So they're trusting that that drug is going to be, and I think they should be able to call or talk to someone and say, I don't know what this is for, I forgot, or whatever.
our staff in the EHR, for any medication, our staff has at the click of a button, every information about that medicine will pop up, answer questions.
Makes it
what have you.
nice.
But the patients often have questions too, so we have a pharmacist that's available to drop in at any time.
There could be over medication,
And under.
and under, yeah. Becker's health report, that's has a physician that was over prescribing medication, and I guess that physician was
In trouble.
in trouble right now.
Yep, that's never something you want to do.
And
So,
hospital,
so
yeah.
summary from the inpatient space, you'll have this, you can look at it in greater detail,
Yeah.
but the summary statement is, they're doing a good job. In years past, we did not have as favorable as what these are, so everybody's moving in the right direction. There's still plenty of opportunity. Again, these surveys are hard because they're very, very subjective. Did we meet a patient's expectation? But that's important. It doesn't always translate to this care safely.
Are you going to say anything about discharge information?
I'm happy to drill down on any of these, I just don't want to drag it out too long.
I'm just curious as to whether when they leave, they get a packet that includes everything.
Survey and everything.
They discharge with a packet that says all of their instructions. So for our swing bed patients, they've got instructions from nursing about how to care for wounds and just things that care. They get a discharge packet that comes from rehab about their activities. And the pharmacist sits down and goes through all their meds with them. And social work gives them their packet about your follow-up appointments, when home health's going to be there. You know, so all the different.
I think that's very important.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
our
and then I
discharge
sponsor.
planner a social worker?
All of our discharge planners
Our
are social
social
workers.
workers.
And sometimes a nurse will float in and work in that team as well.
Okay. Now, HEAPS, again, the acronym is Healthcare Administration. HPS is what? Can you tell me? I know.
Your HCAPS.
HCAPS, yeah. It's Healthcare Administration, the HPS is what? Health Payment System? I don't know. Or
remember.
Health
Sorry,
Patient,
your HCAPS. Your
Health
HCAPS.
Patient Satisfaction Survey,
yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
Okay, I
sorry,
just
I'll
want
get
to,
it for
yeah,
you.
that's okay, that acronym there.
We all-
I know what it is, but I just want to
know,
make sure
it's-
that's,
It's
yeah.
pitiful, but we speak in acronyms.
HCAPS.
Yeah, it's your HCAPS score.
Okay,
We're going to clinics, that, if that helps you, that's called your GCAPS.
the GCAPS. Okay,
All right, this one is actually up on the board for you.
there we go, practice report, okay, not the emergency yet.
No, this is medical practice.
Okay, medical
So
practice.
this is your clinics.
Yeah, it's the next, just about the, right there. No, here, right here. Oh, it's all right. Right now.
Okay. So medical practice, so this display is more intuitive than the other one. And now, remember I told you about top box score, would walk away from that. That only applies to inpatient.
Inpatient.
So now, for the next three that we look at, you're actually getting a score. So remember I said 1 to 10?
Mhm.
And so you're getting, so 90, a score of 96, so really it's 1 to 100 because they change it to a percentage. So in our clinics, you can see the results over, and this is over the last 5 quarters, how they score in the different areas. And so now the questions are different in the clinics, so they ask them questions like access, how easy was it to make an appointment, how easy was it to get here, what was the experience like moving through your visit, and that has really twofold. That talks about what was your wait time, and then how long did your appointment last. How was the nurse or the assistant, how were they to get along with, how was the provider, did they pay attention to you, did they pay attention to you as a person, and then what's your overall assessment. So that's what those different things are about. So you'll see in the clinics, the green diamonds
Yeah.
is the area that we were not doing well in, the green diamonds, and then the standard access, so the bluish, the teal colored squares. So the green diamonds had to do with wait time and communication about wait time. And so what has been done in the earlier part of this year was putting up what we call wait boards. And so they are boards that get updated about every 20 minutes. Right now they're manual updates. Somebody just walks out with a marker, a dry erase marker, and updates the board about, so this provider is now on time, this provider is running 15 minutes late, this provider is 30 minutes late, just to keep them informed. And you'll see they've already, the scores already are going up because we're just keeping them informed about that. And we're seeing that quickly. We know that the providers that tend to always run behind, their amount of running behind hasn't changed, but their scores have gone up. So the communication has really helped. And then,
Standard access too, is not big.
and then the teal colored squares,
Mhm.
so
Standard.
that's the access. And that has to, those are two things. That is about actually making an appointment, and also involved in that is about getting phone calls back. And when we break our questions down, it was about the phone calls. When I made a phone call, did I get a phone call back when I had a question? Or problems tend to be dealt with pretty easily,
Somewhere.
quickly, or they were getting questions back. So again, new processes were put in place. In fact, they rearranged the work responsibilities and assigned a medical assistant who managed all phone calls. So every phone call all day long, that one person is handling, and then can expedite it, watch the time, push on getting results back. And so again, you can see that they were able to push that up. So here we are at the far right, and that's our most recent scores. And you can see all of their measures are up in the near 90% and above area. So they really hit the low-hanging fruit. Now it has to sustain, so it'll be watched for a while to make sure it sustains, and then start chipping at whatever's down below.
There's triaging there that helps
Say that again?
deliver the services. Do they triage also, or just one person, like you said, that's answering phone calls?
It is somebody triaging as the phone
Yeah.
calls come in.
Yeah.
I'm going to answer you no, and the reason I answer you no is because only a nurse can triage.
I see.
And so you don't have a nurse receiving these phone calls, so they have a list of things that if you hear any of these words, you have to escalate it and get a nurse on the phone.
I see. Okay.
So these are patient responses.
Yes.
Is there any indication of how many patients are?
Are represented here?
Well, is there, I don't see it on there.
This one is a
Must be
lot.
on there.
Whoops. We'll pull it up. We have lots of folks who are willing to participate in this.
Oh, there we go.
That's why I did it this way, so that
Mhm.
we could just scroll up and down if you had other questions. So you see along the left-hand side, right there,
Yeah.
355. Those are the number of people who responded. So the overall question, there were 355 responses.
And so the next one down on standard access, that's a different question, and 59 answered it, 28.
People are allowed to skip questions.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Anything else on that? So clinics are really making some great headway. In fact, they have all of their quality improvement projects are focused around patient satisfaction scores. I take that back. They have one that's not. All right, and now we're moving to the emergency department. So you can be finding your ED. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay, different set of questions, but I think you've got the theme now. It talks about how are the nurses, how are the doctors, how was the testing experience, how are your family and friends treated, because family and friends often become part of the story in the emergency department. How are your personal issues handled, likelihood of recommending is on here as well. So the questions from one division to another are different, and again, that's.
So in this ED, the most current is on to the right. The left is the 2018. These are
That's right, these are the last 5
Yeah.
quarters.
So you have 18, 718, 1018,
Yeah.
119, 419, and 719.
The one on the far right is the quarter that we are in the
Right.
middle of right now, so it's an incomplete measurement, but I've got it up there for you anyway. It's what we have to date, and so it represents all the responses from July and part of August. Yeah, so these are just constantly growing. So in the emergency department, obviously you can see that we have scores that, again, tend to camp up in the higher numbers, in the 89 and 90 above. But we have some lower scoring in the personal issues area.
Yeah.
So what's that, were my personal issues treated with sensitivity, was my privacy is protected is in there as well. And so those had always been really high, and so they dropped down low here early in the year.
Yeah,
So
I
the
noticed,
department
yeah.
really was personally, I don't want to say offended by it, they were like, personal ownership of it. They were like, oh my goodness. So they really rallied around, and you can see it starting to head up, and they're pretty regularly exploring what is it that the patient experiences that makes you, that influences this answer. Because I think it's hard to be the patient
Yeah.
It's just hard to go into those shoes. So they're still working on that. There was a lot of, there was some staff leadership change in that interval of time as well.
That can make
And so
a
they think
difference.
that probably had a lot to do with it, because that's really where the touchy-feely, the real soft experiences come in, is right in that set of questions. And we do know that we had some staff leadership changes there. So, and then down here on the bottom is just 3 other questions that just didn't get grouped up in the top for visual cleanliness. And so our likelihood of recommending score really took a dive, which again, it was dramatic for the group, because that has always been one of the highest scores in our departments that have a high likelihood of recommending. So there, and it hasn't fully recovered yet, so they are really spending some time looking at that. So of these, that one is one that has a lot of focus on it right now.
And do you get rationale, do you get information that lets you know? No,
We don't.
that's
So you
unfortunate.
just pair it with what you do know. So you do it, what patients say to you when they're there, what you observe,
you go back and-
asking secret shoppers to come to you.
Do you, are you able to go back to any chart and take a look at something that might indicate that?
We don't know who these people are.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of hard, because
Yeah.
it's nice to have the data, but at the same time, how do you improve it if you don't know certain things? It makes it a little more of a
So
challenge.
you just take
more
it, if
generic.
you've got enough patients, so if your N is big enough, then you know it's real.
Oh,
You know
yeah.
it's real,
Yeah.
and now you just really, you treat it as real and just start drilling down. So one of the things that we've done in that group, especially in the likelihood of recommending, is if we have somebody who comes through that a nice rapport was developed in the course of this day, at the end, they'll just say to them, what was your experience like? What feedback would you give to us? So even though it doesn't count toward these numbers,
You
it
still
counts
staff hearing
towards
it.
the hearing. What was your experience like? Because we can't see it from your seat. We don't sit in the bed. We don't, we're sometimes, you guys, you've done especially, you're so busy and you're running from patient to patient, you don't realize a lot of things. The patients will say eye-opening things to you. Like, well, I ask you something and you just like walk by like you didn't hear me. That hurt, And so somebody
Well, I've been
say,
asking for
"I
water
actually
and it's
didn't."
sitting empty.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. I didn't hear you, and I'm sorry. And so they'll do all kinds of things, but they're really trying to get some better insight into that, because it's hard to understand that all the other scores are really pretty high. Why the likelihood of recommending would be lower.
Yeah.
Anything else on
Do
ED?
you ask, or is there any way to ask why not?
For why not recommend?
Yes,
No,
Because they don't know
because
who
we're not
it is.
asking the question.
I understand, but I just wondered if that question is asked, if they say, no, I won't recommend, that sort of leads into,
Yeah.
why not?
Yeah, these are scored. They try to make a subjective response as objective as possible and put numbers on it. So there's some, if they go into a rant about something, they can capture that. But if they don't go into a rant, if they just make words to kind of explain themselves, that doesn't get captured.
Are the questions defined by CMS?
Yep. They're completely scripted.
Yeah.
And the
that makes-
person,
yeah.
and the person who's asking the question is being constantly assessed to make sure that they're asking it completely neutral, not leading along.
So it's a legitimate.
Yeah, it's to legitimize it, but again,
Legitimize it.
that's, you see people wear out on the test, they're like,
Right.
I'm tired of talking to somebody who's kind of a monotone. So that you'll see them abandon the test or the questions. Feels like a test halfway through.
It could be as simple as whether they had a nice lunch, you understand?
Yeah. They have a good
A
night's
question
sleep.
about food used to be on here, and it got, or on the inpatient one, and it got dropped off.
Hmm.
Medicare decided that wasn't important. We thought it was very important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I move on to outpatient?
Yes.
So we're done with this.
And I know we're flying through, so and you're gonna take these home with you, so if you end up with
Review it, yeah.
questions, just bring them back. Okay, so these are outpatient. Remember I told you outpatients are all of our different outpatient units. And so the display actually is broken down by those different outpatient units, but the same questions each time. So this is our outpatient rehab, not inpatient, but outpatient rehab. So again, you see their scores clustering way up high. The test or treatment took a dive in July in this last quarter. And no one knows why, because you can see they just congregate way up at the top. But again, so now you know that's something the quality committee will be watching for the next couple of quarters. This is the lab, and look at that. They started out, you know, again, this isn't horrible, this is 85%, so that's not horrible. But you see they've slowly moved everything up.
They have. Come down pretty low.
Well, not pretty low.
That's
That's
68.
That's
Well,
84%.
yeah. But when you're comparing, you're just looking at individuals.
Yeah,
it
so
looks
the
like a
display,
big hop.
right, that's what I wanted to point out. It visually looks like a huge change, but they started out not bad, but they took it to better.
Better.
They've taken it to better.
And that's what counts.
And, you know, if you think about it, in a lab, that's actually really hard for the lab to make a change, because nobody likes somebody with their blood drawn, you know, so. This is the radiology department, the next one there. So again, they had, in the last quarter of this last year, they had lower scores, and you know, and so the lower scores were around kind of the person's overall perception, where they're being treated, where they feel like they're being treated respectfully, and those are the ones that didn't score so great. And so the manager went in, shared all that information, again, talking about patient perception, and then look at what happened, they all just skyrocketed right back up again. Good for them.
Yeah, what's that circle with all this little nail or something around it? Doesn't have the equivalent. This circle here, the highest one. 100. That's the little flower. What is that?
I don't know.
There's no equivalent here.
Oh, there's nothing in the legend?
It's because two of them have the same number. It's actually the pink box
Oh,
and the
thank
green
you.
diamond.
Oh, it's the green and, oh, there you go.
Orange stars,
Orange,
orange
yeah,
corners.
the orange
You're right,
Yeah.
it's the over,
Yeah,
thank
the two
you,
of them are on
Jen.
top of each other.
It's the overlap of
Oh,
the
I
facility
see.
diamond.
Yeah, okay, got it.
And the,
Oh, and
And
then
then
this one down here. Yeah.
and
Yeah,
the pink square.
the pink square and then, yeah. Thank you.
There's a couple of them, you can see that.
I see.
And then endoscopy.
Get the magnifying glass.
Yeah, sorry about that. And then endoscopy, that's another one of the outpatient units. So they, well, so here you go. Emma.
Yeah,
Here's
I
what
see it
happens,
now.
here's what happens when all of them lay on top of each other.
Yeah.
What does personal issues mean?
It means, did I feel like I was treated with respect? Did I feel like that you, cared about me as an individual? Did you take my preferences into consideration? It's that type of a grouping of questions. This is infection and wound. So here's interesting in that, look at how in July, you have the number goes real low.
Yeah.
The same month, it's real high. Those are the same staff.
Welcome.
Those are the same staff, they work on either side of a wall. To go back and forth, so.
It's gotta be the I value, right?
Right, so that's the month, the quarter that we're in right now, and so they don't have very many, and so they had somebody who wasn't happy and somebody who was happy.
I'd like to make a note that Commissioner Spikers is here now with us. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad you just carried on without me.
On the side, yeah, and this is just total.
So when you can see this right away.
How's that?
It's okay, this is just a total, so it just brings all of those that we looked at together.
Oh, there we go.
Any questions on the? I don't have any more patient satisfaction.
This is
The
on
next
the
that we'll
total.
talk about is trauma. So like I said, feel free to look, there's more details, and really, I want you to feel comfortable asking questions. All right, so then the other thing that I wanted for us to talk about today was trauma. Again, I try and, each time I do a quality report, I try and do something a little different so that you end up seeing kind of the big picture of the whole organization. So, trauma quality, but to do this, I wanted to go through some definitions with you of trauma. So, trauma, okay, this one, you already know the answer to this one. Trauma is a serious injury or a potentially serious injury. So that's what trauma means in this trauma quality world. There's also this set, these folks who come in who meet the definition of trauma, but there's only some of them that we actually measure, and that's called qualifying trauma. And so that definition is created by our Regional Trauma Council. So our Regional Trauma Council is this region, this Puget Sound region. It's called Region 8. And they have identified a group of injury mechanisms that says anytime any of these mechanisms of injuries occurred, you need to activate the trauma system. So it is not a reflection of how seriously injured the patient is. It says if any of these instances occur, you should activate the trauma system. It sounds counterintuitive, but it actually works just great. So what does a regional trauma team activation, what is that? That says that we activate the system that says we are a lower level and we may have somebody that we need to move up to higher level of care, so just be on alert. So be on alert, higher level of care, we might be sending something to you, and also transfer services, be on alert that we may have somebody that needs to be transferred. And so what it does is positions anybody receiving to be able to receive timely. So it just keeps the whole system ready to respond timely.
And I assume there's a lot of communication going on. This is what happened, this is what we've done, and we are ready to send them to.
So what you're trying to actually avoid is too much communication.
No wonder.
You're trying to not have this rely on people talking. You want to be able to say, alert, I've got a trauma team activation. If I need you, I'll call you later and give you details.
Okay.
Just be on alert. You might be receiving a call from me.
It's interesting because a friend of mine just recently, came here, she had an injured arm, and I guess that triggered a more higher level of trauma. And she says, they never communicated with me. They just took me to Over Lake. Now I see why. And there is a follow-up on her care because it's really serious.
Yeah, if you fall within a trauma team activation, then at that point in time, there is a part of that is not, which hospital would you like to go to? Where do you normally see? That it is your trauma, you may have something seriously wrong. The system is prepared to take you to the right level of care at the right time, and for it to be received and to be timely, and we cannot have, it can't be distracted by any of these other things. So that's how it's set up and designed to be in there. So if you've got that level of attentiveness to the process,
And clarity.
but you also want to make sure that you don't do these two things, the under triage and the over triage. So what you don't want to under triage, which means the mechanism injury met the criteria for activation and you didn't recognize it and get it activated. The reason that's a problem is obviously patient safety. You have a patient who rapidly deteriorated because you didn't recognize that they had a potentially serious injury. And the other thing is your position now have to scramble all your resources because you didn't timely recognize and be able to have all of these very systematic exchanges of either exchanges of a patient or exchanges of expertise, because that's a part of it also. Sometimes you don't send the patient, but you do receive the expertise that comes in from the higher level. You make a phone call and say, here's my story, and they'll say, okay, I don't think you need to transfer them, but here's the things I think you should do. Could you get us this particular type of a CT scan and send it, and I'll take a look at it, and we'll make our next level of decision there. So it's a two-directional exchange there. And the opposite extreme then is over triage. So you don't want to activate unnecessarily, because what you've done now is consume resources in the system, because you've told all your higher level services
And they're
stand
all
by,
waiting.
and so they're holding off getting engaged in anything dramatic that might consume them, and so it's the Peter calling wolf scenario, but it's really about your resources. So it does really feel like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You're looking for just right. So you're looking for just right in there. There are patients who come in that we define as trauma, and we're going to look at that in just a minute, that we say, wow, that's an awful injury. Then we're responding, everything, high rate of speed, contending with it, but they may not trigger the trauma team activation. It doesn't change the way the patient's cared for. It just doesn't trigger the trauma team activation. So, all that being said is all background to understand what it is we're measuring, what our quality measures are for trauma team activations here. So now let me orient you to these charts. So obviously 2019, this is every month of the year up until June. This is where, we're always a month or so behind in getting data just to let it percolate through the system. So the first line is our total number of trauma patients, and that's trauma patients, both the ones that met trauma criteria for the qualified, the regional trauma system, as well as the ones that we say, well, you didn't hit the trauma team, but that's a nasty injury. Both of those together. So that top line is our definition of trauma. So we scrambled our internal resources for that many patients. So we'll stick in January just so I can walk from top to bottom. So in January we had 7 patients who we said were what we called trauma. But skip the second line, skip the number 5, we'll come back to that. So now go to the number 3. So the number 3 says that of those 7, 3 of them did not meet trauma team activation criteria. So 3 of them were us saying, wow, we're going to respond to you, but you don't meet the criteria, so we're not alerting higher level of care. But we'll take care of, we're scrambling and meeting your needs. 4 of them did meet trauma team activation criteria, and all 4 of them were under triaged. So does it make sense where we are? So that's so we saw this from a quality perspective, and actually we had been seeing a little bit in late 2018 as well, but I just want to just show 19. And so one of our quality improvement projects going on right now with a significant intensity is we need to stop this under triaging, because remember what that is, the two things: you're compromising patient safety and you're scrambling your resources at the last minute when you realize that you actually have a patient who does need to move to higher level of care or have a deeper resource utilization, and you didn't prepare everybody to meet those needs.
Is this
I
always
should
in the
pause.
ED?
What's that?
Is this always in the ED? or-
Always.
Okay.
Always. Yeah. So I should pause there and say, even though we've declared this to be a problem, we have not had any negative patient outcomes because of this, but that's the last thing we want to then be talking about, is because we failed to triage appropriately, we had a bad patient outcome. So, you start seeing as we move forward, again, now just to orient you, I apologize. Let me go back and deal with the second line just so that we've talked about every single line. That second line says they were transferred to higher level of care. That's, again, just for us, that's something that we want to know as we're watching all of this. You don't see it calculating into the math at all, because there are times that we'll have somebody who it's a trauma team activation, but now as we care for them over the course of the next hour or so, they actually don't need to be transferred. We tell everybody to stand down. They actually often go home. So they go home as often as they are transferred. So then in February, of the 4 patients who were trauma, 3 of them did not meet trauma team activation. 1 did and was under triaged. So again, things hadn't changed much. And then in March, early March, we started really trying to explore what's going on.
Triage?
Huh?
with your triage?
Well, it's not about the triage. I know it's the same word, but it has to do with the team, how the team is responding. So again, so we were just like, what's going on? So we really started pulling the team into small groups and saying, talk to us. Why did this? Look at how this is trending, and we had a few months before. What's going on? What we learned in that late February when we started drilling down is they were so afraid of calling wolf. They were so reluctant to bring all of our resources to the same room because they know that across our whole organization, we aren't flush in extra people. Everybody's in the midst of doing a job, and if they call the team together, they've left something. You know, call a trauma. In fact, who was in here earlier? You heard a trauma getting called. You know, so they've been working one up there. They know many times through the night there's one person working in the lab. And if they call a trauma, that person's leaving the lab and coming over to the bedside. They know if they call a trauma and there's one person working in imaging, that one person is departing imaging and coming to stand at the bedside. They know there's a nurse upstairs who's assigned to do trauma responses, and when they call a trauma, that person's coming downstairs, leaving them one nurse shorter upstairs to come down and stand at the bedside and to get instructions. So the group totally got it that it was necessary, and they were trying to preserve our own internal resources. So when they started kind of seeing the trends and the data spoke volumes to be able to say, but look what's happening every single time here. And then we had some experiences where we were able to say, look at the scramble that had to happen because this was a late call on here. And now look at them. Now after that happened, now in April, they had of the one trauma patient, it was correct.
Yeah.
And in May, of the 3 trauma patients, the 3 didn't meet criteria. Nobody met criteria, so there was no measure there. But in June, of the 3 that met, 2 of them were correct. The one that was incorrect actually left AMA. so we're gonna presume he was okay, but he left AMA. We actually sent the police after him to check on him because he worried everybody so much. But anyway, they moved in the right direction, so we're still watching this really closely. But it was interesting to discover that it wasn't a lack of knowledge; it was being personally protective or protective of the organization and the resources and the other people that they work with. But this is, you know, the Regional Trauma Council. These aren't our own measures. This is what we see this as important, but this actually is what we report into the Trauma Council. There's a few other quality measures that go in, but this is the one that is the most important because again, this is your whole system, whole system's use.
Could you give us like maybe 4 examples of what makes a trauma level for our hospital?
Sure. Let's see. I'll give you specific patients that we've seen that hit the trauma team, that hit the trauma service. Riding a mountain bike downhill, hit a stump, thrown over the handlebars. So ejected from the bike, thrown over the handlebars, going downhill. So went 50 feet before they stopped to rest. We've had a full rollover, a vehicle with a full rollover and with 4 people in the car. So even though the car came back to rest on its tires, the fact that it was a full rollover and there were more than 2 people in the vehicle. So anytime you've got 4 people in the vehicle, it's just because it's harder to fully assess 4 people than 2. And so that's why it hits the trauma team activation because you've got a higher risk of injury because it's just harder to manage 4 people at once. This one was great. We had another guy who was out in a Jeep. He and his Jeep, his buddy and his Jeep. And they were up in the mountains having a great time. No drinking, no intoxication.
Or swamping mud or whatever they call it when they go out and run with their Jeeps.
I don't know.
Get them all dirty.
I don't know what they were doing, but this guy's Jeep, he lost the road, started heading down, got thrown from his vehicle. He was belted in and somehow got thrown from an open Jeep. So maybe he wasn't wearing it over his shoulder. Got thrown. He went half a mile down the hill before he stopped rolling. His Jeep at least went over him, and so it was only him and the rocks and the trees and whatever else down there. So that one was easy. That one was easy. Kicked by a horse. So kicked by a horse in the chest. Horse roll over on him. So those are the kinds of things that we have. Yeah.
No hockey players?
Oh, I'll tell you some, no hockey players.
You will
Another
next
one,
year.
another one that we see.
By this time
Yeah,
next
another
year.
one that we see a fair amount of is a T-bone vehicle. And so when the body of the car, the protected cage of the car, when it is bent in.
Hmm.
So it's okay that the hood is bent in, it's okay that the trunk is bent in, but when the protective cage of the vehicle is bent in, that's a trauma team activation. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah, and those are some of the things we see. So people are really shocked at some of the stuff that we see here. One other quality measure that happens in trauma, and that is how quickly do we get them out of here. So if they need to be transferred to higher level of care, we need to be moving them on out. The majority of our patients fall into the group that says that they need to be out the door in 180 minutes, so in 3 hours. The other option is they need to be out in 30 minutes. So those are the only two groups. The people who need to be out within 30 minutes, they would never be brought by ambulance to us. They got triaged in the field to already head to Harborview. But if they were to roll in our doors, because we do get traumas brought in by personal vehicles, so if they were to roll in doors, there is a few that have to be out of here within 30 minutes. So those are the ones that we're having trouble maintaining blood pressure. They're having arrhythmias, so their heart's going out of rhythm, in addition to whatever trauma they had. But all of our patients so far are falling in the 180 group. So now look at what our experience is. So again, of our 7 trauma patients, 5 of them were transferred out, and 4 of them exceeded the 180 minutes. So now just follow that same line. 2 of 2 exceeded the 180 minutes. I don't know what that's an error. You can't have, we'll just pass that. 2 of 2 exceeded the 180 minutes. 3 of the 4 exceeded the 180 minutes. And when we drill down and look at why they're exceeding the 180 minutes, what we should have as a different display is when did we have them ready to go and when did they actually leave? Because one of the big problems that we're running into is getting an ambulance here timely to get them out.
That makes sense.
And it's a battle that we've been fighting for years and years, and it's been really, really hard to get traction. And we're hoping that with this information, with this data, that we'll be able to get the backing of the Regional Trauma Council to say something has to be done. I mean, somehow our calls need to get elevated as a trauma member, as a member of the trauma team, trauma system, that we get a better response. Because most of these folks have to be transferred by a higher level ambulance, so by a nurse unit or an ACLS unit. So they can't be transferred by a paramedic unit. Yeah, so this actually, again, no patient compromise other than the fact if you're in pain, you'd like to get to definitive care faster. So that's definitely a compromise. And there aren't things that we can do to push this. You can keep calling, how much longer, and it's the same, we'll be there in the same 45 minutes that we told you the last time you called. But again, so we're hoping that the pressure of the larger group will be able to give us a little better response. We're not the only ones who this is a problem for, others
Just
who are
a
more
shortage
remote.
going on of ambulance services, or?
It's, I'll say capacity, so because I don't know if the problem is too few, but they're all really busy.
These are commercial ambulance services that you're talking about.
Because they're who the whole system leans on to do transfers. That way you can leave your 911 units available to respond. Because if they go out of service to transport a patient, then you're limiting your ability to respond to emergencies in the field, like a car accident or a fire. They're the ones who always respond to the 30-minute transfers. The 911
Right.
calls respond to those. Yeah, but it's commercials. So it's, you know, it's the ambulances that you see on the road all the time. So it's AMR, it's TRICARE.
I haven't seen
TriMed.
as much AMR around here, not as much as it used to be when around this area for some reason.
They're still part of the, they used to park out here, and they've moved their parking location down to Issaquah because they got a little house just off Front Street. So I think that's probably why we don't see them just kind of hanging out here, because they've got a physical planting spot. Yeah. So our trauma system's good, opportunities to improve.
So this data, the statistical data is submitted to the regional council,
Thank you, good question. Department of Health.
Department of Health. And from there, what's the next step when they gather all this data? What's the next step? for them?
All the quality data goes to the Department of Health. We get funding, grant funding to have a trauma system. And so if our quality doesn't meet quality
standard, yeah.
standards, we can be at risk of being exited from the trauma system.
Okay. That's-
It actually, you know, you have to work hard to get
Right.
exited, but they will. I mean, they will. And, or take your grant funding away. Because again, that's part of what pays, because this takes a lot of extra
Comparative, yeah.
resources
It's
to
all
do.
about- Yeah.
Yeah, so the DOH. The
Okay.
Trauma Council also receives this,
Okay.
but the submission goes to the Department of Health. Yeah, they're the ones that oversee the whole trauma system across the
Thank
state.
you.
Any other questions?
Very nice charts.
What's that?
Good job, I thought, those charts.
That's
Thank you.
important
Yeah,
to
these are
us to know what
these
we're
are
doing.
the ones that we look at for the quality committee. This is what we look at, are these.
Who's on the quality committee again? Can you remember?
The quality committee is all the large department leaders. So pharmacy, ED, med-surg, rehab, and then our quality informaticist is there. Safety is there, so facilities director.
And so you meet quarterly or?
Monthly.
Monthly. Thank you.
Yeah, monthly for about 2 hours every month. we meet. And then quality steering is the committee that Daryl and Jen come and sit on, and that's a quarterly meeting.
Okay.
And that's the roll-up of all of this.
Okay, that's good.
Go into number 2.
Go ahead.
Okay,
If you're
so
ready, go ahead.
I'm gonna get us started on number 2. So number 2 is about affiliation. So I'm gonna talk to
We
you real
don't have
quick.
that.
That's a,
Is
you
it
don't.
a district?
You don't.
Oh, okay.
You don't.
Okay.
So just before Steve jumps in and talks about the district budget post-affiliation, I want to talk to you all about a little road bump in the road that we've run into with our conversations with Silver Lake. So this is very, very fresh information. This is 24 hours old. So Steve and I gathered with him yesterday to try to understand. And so I'm just going to be able to explain to you kind of the what has our attention right now. And then these next 2 weeks, we'll be putting together a solution. But let me tell you what the issue that has come up, and it's the first time we've come up with an issue in this whole experience. And so it has to do with the cost-based reimbursement. So let me just walk through what's displayed up here for you. So if you just look at us right now, so this is us, and through our cost report, our revenue comes in 3 different buckets. So we have revenue that comes in from operations, we have revenue that comes in from taxes, and then we have a revenue that comes in through the cost report, which is kind of a rebate of sorts through the cost report that is a reflection of the money that we paid out in interest expense.
In what?
Interest expense. Interest expense, so around our LTGO bonds and our other bonds. So the cost report recoups some of those expenses back to us. And so that recoupment, or what I kind of call a rebate, finds its way onto our revenue line. And then our expenses are the expenses that we incur from operations and the expenses that are part of that interest expense. So this is very, there's a lot more detail, and you guys all know the more detail, but if we just do it in this really high level bucket system, So,
Where does depreciation come in when you're talking about expense? Operations?
Operations.
Right.
yeah. So again, this is not intended to be, this is really intended to talk about the buckets.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the new idea, that we've been working with, so having NUCO and having the district, having them become two separate entities. So in that scenario, you've got NUCO that's going to be the one that has the cost report. And then you'll have the district that will be the one that has the interest expense. So now if you try and follow the money, who is it that said that? Sutton?
No, it was
Watergate. Malone or somebody,
It was
follow the
Watergate,
money?
follow the money.
Follow the money?
Follow the
Okay.
money, yeah.
Okay, so here, let's follow the money.
Yeah.
So revenue from operations, you see where that goes. That revenue from operations will go to NUCO in the new idea. If you look at taxes, the revenue from taxes will continue now to come to the district in the new idealized world. Expenses from operations will go to NUCO, obviously up where operations lives. And interest expense will stay with the district. But the cost reimbursement, the rebate that comes from the expenses to, the expenses associated with paying for the interest, it doesn't go anywhere, it's lost. Nobody gets it, so Medicare
wins.
gets it. Medicare wins. Nobody gets that, it doesn't go to either group. And the problem is because the interest expense has to be incurred by the one who's doing the cost report.
So NUCO would?
No,
No.
no one, it's
Because it's doing-
because you see how NUCO's the one with the cost report,
Right.
and the district is the one with the interest expense.
Oh, okay,
So because they're not together,
yeah.
because the cost report and the interest expense isn't with the same entity, that 1.5 to
So it's
1.9
floating.
million dollar goes to no one.
Float. Oh.
No, it needs to
Float
stay.
felt
Somebody
better,
needs
float
to-
felt better
Yeah.
than in a dark hole loss.
Or that could be remedied, though.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
what we're gonna spend
That's
the
the
next
issue.
2 weeks aggressively working on to figure out what is the solution around that. But I didn't want to know this. I didn't want to walk in tonight to know this and not make sure that you knew it as well.
That's very good to know.
And then when we meet, so in 2 weeks, we have our next work study, and so hopefully we'll be walking in with a solution to figure out how do we recoup that.
Yeah.
Because that's the last thing we want to do is walk away and leave that much money
Yeah.
sitting, not coming to anybody's benefit.
What is Overlake's position to date on this?
That
Situation.
we are all completely aligned around our reaction to this. Yeah, so when we yesterday went through and talked about it with them, we spent a lot of hours just talking through and making sure that we all completely understood, doing a bunch of drawings. So it's a lot of alignment, and so there's no contention.
Hopefully, we
just
won't have to
figuring
do
it
a
out.
cost report.
I don't think
Well, you
we're
just-
allowed to.
Yeah, you've gotta, so we've gotta
Can
figure out
strike that one.
what's a structure that will allow the cost report and the interest expense
together.
to be in a together version,
Together.
so that those dollars are
Right.
reaped. So,
Meanwhile, it's up in
Yeah.
the cloud.
yeah, like I said, up in the cloud or down in a
Somewhere
dark
down.
hole, either way, they're not accessible and not to anybody's
A
benefit.
You have a subsidiary of the hospital that is wholly owned by Overlake Controls,
Otherwise, it's, the subsidiary is us. Therefore, something
Therefore,
like
we
that,
should
I
get
would
it.
imagine.
It'll require something of that nature
Some
and still
extra
have it,
entity, you
Yeah.
think, Skip?
and try to have it
You know, I don't know,
consistent.
but I have to believe that this has been figured out some other way, and so I know that this
Yeah.
team is gonna work to find a pathway. There's a pathway, I'm sure, that has to be found. You can't leave that kind of money on the table.
No.
So, yeah,
That's
so
big.
we are not at a place of saying, we have no ideas. Actually, we have a list of ideas, and that's, but sharing, going through the whole list tonight is
I would imagine the
productive.
two legal counsel between the two, we could figure something out.
They have.
Brian.
And, well, and it's as much legal counsel, but it's also involved in
Finance.
cost report.
Yeah.
Having it's the cost report experts, and so they're part of the compensation as well. So, that, sorry, I'm like leaving you hanging, but this, again, now you know where we are, and you're really
Nice.
investing a lot of time.
No, I appreciate
And then
That's fine.
More to come.
When
But it
did you
doesn't,
discover all of this issue? When did you discover that
sorry,
there's
that's what I said earlier, this is 24 hours old.
Oh, I'm only 24 hours, okay, so it just.
Takes a little more time to write.
Are
Yeah.
there,
So-
are there any
Yeah,
models?
yeah, and so 45 minutes of that was creating this really fun animated
Next.
slideshow.
Good.
Oh,
Are there any
Nice.
models
Nice
out
job.
there
Oh,
that
okay.
we could look at where this has happened before to another organization?
This will happen to any organization who has done this, who, a critical access hospital, who has gone through this breaking apart.
There have been some.
I'm sure there have, and we'll have to find them. You know, we've been using the model, the Swedish Edmunds model,
Yeah.
but that didn't involve critical access hospital.
Right.
So we don't have this in that model to follow that, and so we'll have to go out and work to identify. It's, hopefully Brian will be able to
Brian,
find it.
Yeah.
For all the work that he's done around, it's just none of the local experiences
Okay.
happen.
So burden is all
Makes
out,
sense.
it's not like the model is different.
I'm reluctant to answer you because I don't know what the outcome of the next couple of weeks of work is gonna be. So you said burden out, and so I'm reluctant to acknowledge that with a nod or a
That's
shake.
okay, yeah, I know.
Okay, okay, I've talked enough, and we'll let Steve talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, your questions are, there's not a simple solution, but there's.
Yeah,
we'll
I'm
find
sure
it.
you'll find
You know,
one.
it's where we are. I wanted to give you
Nothing is impossible.
an update on our post-affiliation budget. With what Kim just said, this will change. But what I want to do is get in front of you every time and say, this is this iteration. You see, August 28th, 2008, that's today's version of it. And we took information from our last meeting and then expanded the data. And then we'll be working on what does it look like under the solution Kim talked about. Again, I don't think your post-affiliation roles are going to change. Your landlord, population health, oversight of tax dollars, and managed ag. That's what's left with the district, post-affiliation discussion and outcomes. You guys have seen this before? Well, we added to the display, we took the profit and loss statement we had. We said, okay, put in cash buildup, and then how does the district perform against its bond covenants? And this, you probably remember, bond covenants is a fancy word for financial targets that we, the district, promised the bondholders we would hit in our operational performance, and those are still in effect. Question? Feel free to ask any questions. After, about the next 3 meetings, you'll really get tired of me presenting this budget. But, sorry guys, here I am. Again, assumptions, same assumptions we had before. Staffing, nothing's changed, expenses changed. David pointed out one expense going down in the last, I upped it a little bit. I had said, okay, less legal expense the last year, but, you know, we know the lawyers will want their money, so. I got 2 of them in the room.
Couple of them in the room, actually.
And legal service is valuable, let me tell you. I added cash balance, revenue bond, covenant requirements, which are maximum annual debt service, MATS. Sounds like the magazine, but it's not. And days cash on hand.
Is that our reserve?
The maximum annual debt service?
No, when you say cash on hand,
Cash on
is
hand.
that the reserve?
That's
that we
the
have to
unknown,
pay?
that's the unrestricted cash. In other words, it's not
Oh, okay.
reserved. Our reserve is with US Bank and we just can't touch it. This is the unrestricted cash that builds up. Okay. So, no real changes. If you can see it, but down here, okay,
debt service coverage, the requirement is 1.05, and we meet that. And the requirement is 1.05 for a entity with an A rating for their bonds. Overlake and its obligation group has an A rating. And we want to structure it so that that A rating stands behind the revenue bond debt. And then days cash on hand.
Because right now, our revenue bond debt is not rated.
We're unrated. We're unrated. And the A rating allows Overlake to basically make a lower payment. If they weren't A rated, they would pay 1.2% of debt service. With A rating, they pay 1.05%.
And it's legitimate to sort of piggyback on their rating?
Yeah, they'll set it up so that the obligator, the promiser,
Yeah.
is Overlake
Okay.
and that A-rated entity.
Thank you.
And that's going to be part of the legal setup.
Yeah. Got it.
Okay. And so cash buildup, you see, cash builds up to about $7 million on this. And what's done with the cash? Well, right now we say it's unrestricted. Part of it will go to a trust account. And that's going to be what the ultimate, what is done with the cash will be, again, part of the negotiations as we go forward. And again, this will change somewhat, but I want to say, okay, here's the version we're starting out on. After we talk to Overlake and say, okay, what's a structure that we want? You'll see a number of iterations of this same budget going forward. It's not going to be, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's doable, and we'll keep you informed on what does this budget look like going forward as we proceed through negotiations. So we see a number of versions of this. Questions, comments? This is really an update. You're going to get tired of this display, but we want to keep you informed as we go through.
One of the things I think it would be helpful, and I'm sure the taxpayers would want to know, hypothetically, if this does happen and Overlake does end up purchasing the hospital option, what would be left for taxpayers when this is done to pay off at that point?
Okay.
And it would be nice to know, I think, to let people know that in 6 years, we're not going to be $100 million in debt. We're probably going to be more like 40.
So really, what's the taxpayers' commitment, obligation, and debt repayment? That would be. We'll add that to the next display. That's a good point. Any other comments, questions?
You were going to do a study about how much it would take to reconstitute hospital operations.
We are in the process of looking at that, and we have some resources to wrap our arms around that number, what that is. And not only number, you've got to look at what's the process, what are the options to reconstitute. There are a number of options that I hadn't even thought of, and then talking to, met Keith Clevin, he and I were chatting, and he opened up some new options that we're going to explore and then put numbers behind, and we will have that for you shortly, and ask me to define shortly, but it, within a month probably.
Our goal is to have that the next one of these work studies.
The next one of these to have
Not
that.
the one that happened before the board meeting, the one that happened on
Yeah,
Wednesday night.
so to have that for you. So it's kind of a, I was telling Kim, it's taking kind of a scope number and then getting down to details. Here's really what we think is a really good number.
It's going to be an order of magnitude, because it won't be a detailed estimate.
I think we can go into, will it be really fairly detailed on it? I think we can get something beyond just an order of magnitude scope number and have actually walk you through assumptions we've made, here's how we got there, here's the pieces behind that. So more than just, well, I think it's that, here's why it's
Okay.
that, and have a pretty detailed explanation of how we got there. Okay? Any other questions, comments?
I have a question that I'm trying to think how to phrase it. I know in the LOI, there's that after 5 years, they either have to purchase it or give it back to us.
Mhm.
Or yeah. So my question is, if in 5 years, let's just say, I mean hypothetically, we want to get that back, can we add that, can we put something to that effect in the definitive agreement?
That's,
That has to do with purchasing the hospital. I mean, I'm trying to frame it where it's much more, I'll think about, but that's just
Yeah,
my
okay.
thoughts that I wanted to share. Like in 5 years, let's say, you know,
What's
the
gonna
tax,
happen?
yeah, wanted, hey, we don't want to
As-
sell the
The
hospital.
place that we put that,
Yeah.
if you
yeah.
pull up the trust agreement
Yeah,
documents
because
that we worked through,
That's where it would,
inside there is where it kind of, there is repercussions
Yeah,
to
okay.
making a choice not to buy the
Continue,
hospital
okay.
when they're called in
Right.
2025, because that means all the trust dollars are no longer available in the state of the district.
Mhm.
That's the
Okay.
place where we put the.
yeah, I just want to make sure that before we do the definitive, that all those
Yeah.
things can be,
It's all,
you know,
Mhm.
cleaned up. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, that, those types of provisions will
Yeah.
be
Maybe she-
built into the definitive agreement, well vetted with you guys.
So we don't know what's
You'll
going to happen in 5 years, you know?
That's right, well, that's the 5
We
years
might
is
be
the
doing
first time the
really
bonds are callable. So that's
No,
right,
I
that's
don't
true.
know. I mean, we
No,
don't.
Gene.
Yeah, we're not gonna wait till 2025 to hear their decision.
No.
How much lead time are we going to be given on that decision? And can we start looking for another partner if they've decided, as one of our options, if they've decided that they're not going to buy or continue?
Again, I can't give you a definitive answer, but it would be prudent to have a notice period.
6 months.
6 months
6 months
sounds-
is the notice period that's in
That
the
long
right.
enough?
Oh, okay.
I think so. Given what I briefly learned about the options for a restart and the fact that you can hire people to help you, or if you need to, say you want to sell the hospital, say you did, there are actually, there's a path that way too. So there are a number of paths, and I think the 6 month is probably a fair time frame
To get notice.
to give notice and start, okay, planning,
Right,
what's
right.
gonna happen. And it's a lot of work, but I think that's a fair time frame.
Well, fair time frame for maybe private entities that are quick to be able to make decisions because they can meet
Yeah.
more than once a month. But
Okay.
Public
Now-
entities like us
Again,
You
take
can
a
meet
lot
more
of
than
time.
once a month.
Yeah.
I
I'm
know,
not-
but
I'm
it
not-
just
I'm not
seems like
saying-
everything
I'm not
takes
saying I'm sure, but this
really
kind of
long.
discussion will go, you know, that's, sometimes, David, I think you think I stake a position, I'm just saying, well, that sounds good to me now, but again, something to think about. Because there's a lot to think about, and there's no final decisions. Everybody has their own opinions, and that's something we need to work out, and we will have to decide, okay, this is what we think is fair based on what we have to do.
Well, 6 months formal notice may be okay, but I would hope that during that last year, we develop a feeling of whether this is going to go forward and be ready at the 6 month point if it looks or has led up to a feeling that this is not working. You know, so I'd like to have a year, frankly, but
Yeah, you're right.
Steve, may I ask? So I'm looking for our line for population health. And I think it's that change in net position. But I'm also seeing, no, we're gonna commit that money toward the debt service.
No, we haven't decided what we're gonna commit the money to. And
Okay.
one of the things we'll have to decide when we finalize this is how do we pay for population health? Is part of this, oh God, I
Yeah,
didn't do
rules
that.
and
Oh, thank
responsibilities,
God. Part of this cash buildup
Okay.
going to fund population health? And how does that work kind of accounting book-wise too? How do we show that?
Okay.
Yeah. This isn't the basics, but this is the kind of foundation we'll do as we go forward and change it with just various iterations. Questions, comments? Thank you very much. Now,
I guess I'm gonna say, Jen, the population health is a big deal for me
It
too.
is for all of us.
For all of
It's
us.
a really big deal.
For all of us,
And-
yeah.
Although I have to, tip my hat to the bean counters that we also really have to be aware of our
Yeah, we do.
obligations to the bondholders and
Yeah, we do.
meeting that 1.5
No.
mass coverage.
Yeah.
So that has to be our first obligation, but boy, it would be great to find some money for population health.
The only money that we have said, we've obligated to be put directly to paying bonds are the extra additional 1%, we get about $30,000.
Every year with
We've been
taxes.
doing that for about 4 years. It's been a cash account sitting by itself, I think.
no, it's mixed in, but it's separated
But
on our
we-
books.
We've actually had,
Yeah, there's an
ledger.
entry for board designated funds
So
on our balance sheet.
that's the only, monies that we have that have been obligated only to pay taxes. If we're able
Yeah.
to at some later
Yeah.
time. That's, or bonds, I guess.
Okay.
Not taxes, bonds.
Bonds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think we decided that when it went over about 104 million.
Yeah.
And I think we're at 96 million, we've paid about 8 million since that time.
And Jen, we prefer to be called blueberry counters.
So,
Just me.
anyway, I
Okay.
just, a little background.
So we're done with quality, we're done with post-transaction budget. Public comment, do we have any public comment?
For the record, Scott Scowcroft from West Seattle. I regretted not mentioning it at the Board of Commissioners meeting a couple of weeks ago, but the subject of reconstituting a hospital foundation was brought up, and I just think that that's a wonderful idea, and I want to commend the board for thinking about that. There are just tons of people in the Snoqualmie Valley who want to give their money away, and they do it every day and every year. And if you don't have a hospital foundation, then you're passing up an opportunity to let them have their money, their philanthropy, be local, and be local for healthcare. Also, a foundation can go out and seek grants. And so that's a second great reason for a hospital foundation. And the third is just, it can be an ambassador, it can be a champion for the hospital district. If the hospital is operated by Overlake, they can champion that. If there is a Verdant model public health outreach that the Board of Directors, Board of Commissioners want to do, they can do that. One thing about a nonprofit organization, though, is even if you set it up, even if it's your child, it is independent from you. The executive director answers to the Board of Directors, and the Board of Directors have a fiduciary responsibility to their mission. So there's a bright line between the district and the Board of Commissioners and the nonprofit organization. Is that a problem? No, but it's
No.
just something that you would
Might be aware of.
should be aware of. And from everyone nodding your heads up and down, I see that you do realize that. The second thing I wanted to just mention was I was very happy to see that the hospital district hosted a symposium on the SAIL program. Is that a proper way of phrasing it? It's almost like coming full circle because it was 8 or 9 years ago that the hospital district got a $50,000 grant to introduce the SAIL program to the world. It had been developed in Tacoma, and they had certification of SAIL instructors down there. That's where they did their evidence base. But the first institution, the first organization to really introduce it to the outside world was the Snoqualmie Valley Hospital District. And it was the district that certified numerous instructors throughout the region. It's a district that underwrote the SAIL program at the Mount Si Senior Center for a few years. So there's deep roots in terms of SAIL, many connections between SAIL and the district, and the SAIL success is due to no small measure Nancy Rickerson's and the hospital district's efforts to really promote it. So I thought that was pretty interesting too. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on. Upcoming board meetings, affiliation work study will be Thursday, September 12th, 2019, 4:30 to 6 in the East West Conference Room. Our regular business meeting will be Thursday, September 12th, 2019 at 6:30 North South Conference Room. And work study will be September 25th, 2019 at 6:30 North South Conference Room. Do I have
I make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Madam Chairman, prior to adjourning, I will, for your footnote, so you won't be able to sleep tonight, tell you the acronym of HCAPS. For the Information Report. It comes from CMS. It's called the Hospital Consumer Assessment of Healthcare Provider Systems.
Oh.
That is statutorily required by CMS, and you can find that on any of their websites.
Now,
Okay.
Now you can sleep.
You guys will sleep.
I was wondering what HCAP
HCAP.
I'll have to write the whole thing out. Okay, so moving right along, we've got
We adjourn.
we adjourn.